I stood at the registration table with a pie in my hands and a smile that had aged 50 years. My name tag was blank. They said the printer ran out of ink. But the woman behind the table still asked, "Sorry, what was your name again?" She squinted like she might place me if I smiled wider. I didn't. I gave her my name, slow and clear, and watched it pass through her like smoke. She didn't catch it, just nodded, and handed me a pen. The gym looked the same. Peeling banners, plastic tablecloths, chairs too cold for comfort. The same girls were there, too, though their faces had softened, sagged in places. The ones who used to borrow my notes. The ones who whispered behind their hands when I walked past. And the boys who borrowed my answers, my patience, my quiet. One of them patted my shoulder and said, "Did you used to be in my homeroom?" I said nothing, just walked to the far end of the folding table, pie still warm in its dish, and sat down next to the coats. No one offered me coffee. No one asked where I'd been, or what I'd made of my life. They laughed about grandkids and cruises, about golf and kitchens being redone. I listened, nodded, watched the clock, but I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was thinking about the building they now work in, the nonprofit where two of them serve as advisors, the education board one of them brags about sitting on, the same board I've quietly been part of for 6 years, the same board that just finalized a renovation project, the same project that includes a new wing, with naming rights and a plaque. I trace the edge of the pie plate with my finger and imagine the look on their faces next spring when they walk into that building and see my name etched into stone, 10 feet wide. No more confusion. No more forgetting. They thought I'd just fade away. I didn't. I built the walls they walk under. And this time, they'll have to look up to see me. I wasn't the loud one. Never had been. I was the girl in the second row with the sharpened pencils and the quiet hands. Smart, yes, but not the kind who raised her voice to prove it. I waited for the teacher to call on me, even when I knew the answer. I lent out pens that never came back. I helped classmates with their science projects, wrote notes for friends who skipped school, proofread essays during lunch while eating mine cold. I was dependable. I was steady. And I was invisible in the way quiet girls often are useful, but never seen. We didn't have much growing up. My shoes were always a little too tight or a little too worn. My dresses were passed down from cousins, hems let out and sleeves taken in, stitched by my mother's tired hands. I never complained. I knew better than that. My mother worked 2 jobs and still came home to cook. My father didn't stay long. I learned early that comfort wasn't promised, and kindness didn't always return to you. But still, I gave it. It was the only thing I had to offer, really. That and my time. In school, they liked to borrow things from me. My homework, my patience, my answers. I remember one boy, I won't say his name, copied my entire term paper once. Got an A. I got a B because the teacher thought mine seemed too polished. I didn't say a word. I just folded the paper and put it in my bag, feeling the heat rise in my face. Not from shame, but from disappointment. I kept helping him anyway. It was easier than being alone. The girls weren't much different. They laughed at my shoes, my haircut, my lunch and reused foil. But when finals came, they hovered by my locker asking for help. I always gave it. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that if I kept being good, being generous, someone would notice. Someone would say, "She's the reason I passed," or "She's got something special." But no one did. They took what I gave, smiled when it suited them, and forgot me the moment the test was over. I had dreams once. Teaching, writing. I wanted to publish poems, maybe run a library in a small town, know every child's name and which book they loved best. But I stayed close to home instead, took care of Mama when she got sick, worked long hours at a job that needed doing, helped my sister with her boys, packed their lunches when she worked the night shift. I never called it sacrifice. It just felt like what women did, what girls like me did. We stepped aside so others could have space to shine, and I watched them glow from the corner, smiling with pride and just a pinch of ache. All I ever wanted was a little grace, a moment of being seen, not fame, Not applause. Just someone saying, I remember her. She mattered. But I learned, over time, that people forget those who hold the ladder steady. They remember the ones who climb it, not the ones who kept it from falling. The years passed. I stayed kind, kept helping, kept showing up, and slowly, I built a life that was mine. Not big, but real. I worked in the same office for 30 years. I was the one who trained the new hires, remembered birthdays, stayed late to make sure everything was done right. When my boss got promoted, he thanked the team but forgot my name in the speech. I smiled anyway, brought in muffins the next day. That's just how I was. When the reunion invitation came, I thought maybe this time they'd remember. I still had the pie recipe Mrs. Daly loved. I still wore my hair long, silver now instead of brown. I wasn't expecting red carpets or confetti. Just recognition. Just a spark of memory. But they looked right through me, like I was a guest someone else brought, asked my name like it was their first time hearing it. And something in me's old, soft part broke. Not loudly, just a quiet pop, like a thread giving way. I helped. I shared. I smiled, even when it hurt. And not one of them remembered the girl who saved their grade. But I remembered. I remembered all of it. And this time, I wasn't going to keep it folded in the corner of my life. I had earned more than polite forgetfulness. I had earned my name, spoken fully, carved in stone, wrapped in something real. And while they laughed and sipped punch and swapped vacation stories, I was already planning the one they'd never forget. Because the truth is, I never needed their praise. I just needed my place. And now, I'd take it back with both hands. The email came late weeks after everyone else had already RSVP'd. I almost didn't go. Thought maybe it was a mistake. My name was spelled wrong in the subject line. Reunion RSVP, Loretta? With 2 R's and a question mark like I wasn't sure myself. I stared at it a long time. That name was mine, but not the way they remembered it. Not with love, not with laughter. Just as a faint shape they couldn't quite place. Still, something in me wanted to see. Not them. Exactly. Just the place. Just the proof that I'd once been real there. When I arrived, I smiled at the woman at the welcome table, the one passing out name tags and flimsy plastic cups. She looked at me like I was the mailman. Last name? She asked. I gave it. Watched her scan the list. Oh, she said, squinting. You're not on this sheet, but there's extras. She handed me a blank tag and a marker. I wrote my name, myself slow, neat, the way I used to sign library cards. Then I stuck it on my chest and walked inside. The room smelled like old punch and furniture polish. Same gym floor. Same stage. Same echoes of shoes and half-hearted claps. They decorated in school colors, gold and navy, with photos taped to the walls, class trips, pep rallies, faded snapshots of people who'd barely changed beneath their age. I looked for my face and didn't find it. Not once. People talked at me, not to me. Still in town? One man asked while glancing past me at someone else. You look familiar, a woman said, holding her drink with 2 hands like it might save her. Another asked, weren't you in the drama club? I shook my head. Yearbook. She blinked, then smiled too big. Right, of course. But she didn't remember. Not really. It was just a shape they wanted to fill in, like coloring around the edge of something without ever knowing what it was. I stood near the tables, holding a plate I didn't fill. Heard someone laugh behind me and say, is she one of the teachers? I didn't turn around. Didn't explain. Just let the words pass over me like smoke. They asked what I did with my life. I told them. I said I worked in public service. That I helped run a foundation for underserved schools. That I served on a regional board that funded education and community projects, including the one they were all sitting in that very moment. I said I'd raised 2 daughters and helped send more than 40 other girls to college through the scholarship program I started. They blinked, smiled politely. One man nodded, like he was trying to calculate whether that was impressive or not. Oh, anyway, he said, already turning to someone shinier, someone with a louder story, someone whose life fit neater into the old yearbook captions. I wasn't surprised. Not really. Just tired in that deep bone way. The kind of tired that doesn't ask for rest, just for release. I walked through that room like a ghost. I sat at the corner of a folding table and watched the way they leaned in close to the cheerleaders. Turned realtors, the football boys turned insurance men. They clapped hardest for the ones who told stories they already knew. Wedding photos, lake houses, vacations to the same few places. I was a flicker in their eyes, not a flame. I don't think they even meant to be cruel. It was just easier not to see me. Like they never had. They still thought quiet meant nothing. They still thought soft meant small. And they still didn't know what strength looks like when it doesn't ask for attention. When I went to the restroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had faded. My curls had fallen a little flat in the humidity. But my eyes, they hadn't changed. They still held the same things I carried back then. Knowing, waiting, fire without smoke. I stood there for a long moment, then pulled my name tag off and dropped it in the trash. Not because I was ashamed, but because I finally realized they'd never been able to read it in the first place. I walked out of the building with my pie untouched, my purse over one arm, and my name whole inside me. They didn't remember me, but I remembered everything. And that was enough. Because ghosts don't haunt the halls, they build them. And I was already making plans. They handed out the programs just before dinner trifold sheets, printed in gold ink on glossy paper, listing each classmate and their updates. Careers, retirements, awards, grandbabies, vacation homes. I scanned the columns once, then again. My name wasn't there. Not in bold, not in the fine print, not even misspelled this time. Just missing. No mention of the foundation I helped build. No line about the board I serve on. No note about the community centers I've helped fund. But there was plenty of space for the man who now sells lakefront properties 3 states over, and the woman who raises awareness through an Instagram page about organic living. I tucked the program under my plate. Didn't want it anymore. One of the organizers, Carol or Carla, I forget which, stepped up to the mic and said we were going to take a class photo before dessert. She asked for everyone to come forward in rows. I stood up like everyone else, smoothing the front of my blouse, ready to follow. She stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Would you mind watching the coats?" she said, already placing a pile in my hands. "It's just too crowded up there, you understand?" Then she turned, smiling, toward someone else. I stood there, stunned, holding the weight of old jackets and damp purses, like a coat rack in human form. They all gathered on the steps, laughing, elbows touching, heads leaning together. Someone called out, "Say class of 72," and the camera clicked, sealing them in a frame I was never meant to be part of. After the photo, I slipped back to my seat without a word. The microphone squealed once, then settled as the class leaders began their speeches. The same people who'd ruled the hallways then still held the spotlight now. The former student council president talked about leadership. The head cheerleader now on her 3rd marriage spoke about women finding their voices. I listened, stunned by the irony. My voice had been steady for decades. On city councils, on nonprofit panels, in boardrooms where real decisions were made. But in that room, I might as well have been furniture. Not one of them mentioned me. Not a single word about the grants I'd written, the girls I'd mentored, the buildings I'd helped raise from dirt lots and broken promises. Nothing. Just a long list of vacations and golf handicaps. And every time someone stepped up to speak, they read off the same names. Names that were already gold-plated in their memory. Names that came easy, that didn't need to be earned. Even the microphone seemed to turn its back on me. Even the candles flickered away from my face, like they knew I wasn't supposed to glow here. I waited through it all, clapped when they expected me to, smiled when someone passed by with a slice of cake and didn't think to offer one to me. When they brought out dessert, I stood up, quietly, slipped my arms into my coat, picked up my keys, and left without a sound. I don't think anyone noticed. Maybe they thought I was heading to the restroom. Maybe they thought I'd already gone. That's how little space I took up in their mind show easy I was to misplace. The parking lot was dark, except for the dull yellow streetlight that buzzed like it was tired too. I unlocked my car, sat for a moment with the engine off. The silence inside the car felt softer than the noise in that room ever had. No small talk, no forced laughs, just me, and a quiet that knew my name better than anyone in that gym ever did. I drove home without the radio on. The highway was nearly empty, just headlights flickering in the distance, and my own reflection faint in the window. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel small. I felt clear, like something had lifted. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for them to offer something they never had. Recognition, respect, remembrance. I had earned my place in this world the hard way, one paper, one paycheck, one girl helped at a time, and they could keep their speeches, their lists, their staged photos and catered cake. I didn't need to be in the program. I was about to be on the building. Let them forget me, in their newsletters and memory books. Let them hand me coats and misspell my name. I'll let the stone remember for them. Because when they walk into that new wing, when they see the dedication plaque, my name centered, carved, real, they won't be able to look away. Not anymore. And I won't be standing in the back. I'll be standing in the foundation. When I got home from the reunion, I didn't throw anything. I didn't curse or cry or call anyone to rehash the insult. I just hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and boiled water for tea like I always do. Chamomile, steeped long, with a squeeze of lemon. The house was quiet, just the creak of the radiator and the soft clink of my spoon in the mug. I carried it to the kitchen table, where the file box sat waiting in the corner. It was labeled assets in my tidy handwriting, faded now but still clear. I hadn't opened it in months, maybe longer, but I knew exactly what was in it. I always kept my things in order, even when no one noticed. I slid the lid off and flipped through the folders. Pension, savings, property, charitable holdings. And then I saw it, Community Development Fund, regional projects. A small stack of statements bound with a paperclip. I thumbed through them slowly, the way you might trace an old scar. Each page listed investments, votes, and board actions. Most people don't pay attention to the fine print. I always did. It's how I knew, right then, what none of them had remembered. I had voting shares. In fact, I was the third largest individual contributor to the development initiative funding, the new education wing they all love to brag about. The one their kids and grandkids would be using. The one the class leaders had pretended to know something about when they gave their speeches. I leaned back in my chair, took another sip of tea. Then I reached for the phone. I called my attorney, Mr. Hastings. He's about as dramatic as a paperclip, which is just how I like it. I told him I wanted to exercise my right of input on the naming of the facility. He said, "You certainly can." I said, "Good. Let's draft the paperwork by Monday." Then I opened my laptop. I didn't write an email or a press release. I opened a blank document and started designing the plaque. I've never liked anything flashy. Just sharp. Just clear. I typed my full name at the top, no abbreviations, no initials. Just me, Loretta May Garner. Underneath, in smaller letters, I added, "In dedication to the women who stayed late, helped quietly, and were never thanked properly." I read it back once. Let it sit there in the quiet glow of the screen. That was the truth of it, not revenge. Just recognition. Just finally telling the truth out loud and letting it stay told. I spent the next few days tightening the language. Called the foundation office and requested a copy of the naming agreement. Asked for dimensions, location of the plaque, material options. Bronze, I decided. Something that would weather well but last. Not gold too soft, not marble too cold. Bronze, solid, reliable, like me. When the forms came, I signed them without ceremony. No flourish, no witnesses, just a pen pressed to paper in the exact place they'd left blank for me all those years ago. My name filled the space perfectly, like it had always been meant to go there. They thought I disappeared, that I melted into the edge of their memory, like steam off a dish they forgot to serve. But I wasn't gone. I was gathering. I was waiting for the right kind of ink, Not red pen on a class roster. Not pencil in the margins of someone else's paper. But permanent, legal, seen. The kind of ink they can't erase. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not even the women in my book club. I didn't need to. The act was enough. Quiet justice doesn't need an audience. Just a place to land. I cleaned out the file box after that. Shredded old bank letters. Archived the rest. Then I put the assets label back on and returned it to the closet. It felt lighter now, like it had finally done its job. Every now and then, I think back to the look on Carol's face when she asked me to hold the coats. How quick she was to decide who belonged in the picture and who didn't. I wonder if she'll remember me when she stands in front of that plaque next month at the ribbon cutting. I hope she does. I hope all of them do. Because this time, my name won't be whispered or misspelled or skipped over. It'll be the first thing they see when they walk through those doors. The first name their children will read. The one that lasts. And when they ask, who was she again? Someone will answer, she built this. And that will be enough. The final paperwork came in a thick envelope, heavier than I expected. Cream stock, embossed seal, black ink that didn't smudge. It felt like something old and serious, like a contract from a time when words mattered more. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to feel every word land where it belonged. Every clause, every line, every place where my name was no longer missing. Loretta May Garner. Not a nickname, not a footnote, not that lady from the reunion. Full, firm, final. At the very bottom of the last page, right beside the signature line, it read, naming rights for the East Wing of the Glenmore Education Center. Just beneath that, permanent dedication plaque, primary entrance wall. I signed with my favorite pen, the one I use for real things, birthday cards, condolence letters, rent checks for the girls I helped through school. And beside my signature, I wrote 3 extra words in blue ink, barely legible but unmistakable, for the forgotten girls. That was the quiet promise I'd made to myself when I left that reunion parking lot in the dark. That no other girl would sit in a room she helped build and feel like a stranger. That no one would be asked to hold the coats while the one she carried got the spotlight. That some names would stay, not because they were loud or lucky, but because they mattered. The granite for the plaque was chosen by the board, but I reviewed the final rendering myself. Simple serif font. No gold, no glitter, just clarity. My name at the top, then the dedication. In honor of the women whose work was overlooked and whose worth was never forgotten. Below that, the fund's name and the year. No frills, no jokes. Just the truth in stone. The unveiling was modest, just the way I asked. No ribbon, no podium, just a soft gathering of board members, staff, and a few press people who scribbled notes like they were writing something small but necessary. I wore a navy dress, the same one I'd worn to a scholarship dinner years ago. My mother's pearls, polished. Lipstick just bold enough to remind me I hadn't faded. I stood near the back, hands clasped. I didn't need to be at the center. I just needed to be there. They pulled the cloth back slowly. The granite gleamed in the sunlight, and for a moment, no one spoke. Just silence. The kind that says something important has happened. A few gasps. A pause. Then the murmurs began. That's her? I didn't know. She was in our class, right? Someone turned toward me slowly. Recognition dawning not all at once, but piece by piece. I nodded. Just once. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't owe them that. Let the stones speak now. They built careers inside walls I helped fund. They sat at conference tables I helped make possible. They handed out scholarships I pushed through in budget meetings they never attended. And they never saw me, never looked at me. But the walls did. And now those walls remember. I watched them read every word. Watched the ones who gave speeches at the reunion shift awkwardly in their heels. The ones who forgot my name squint, suddenly unsure of themselves. Some of them smiled at me, like it was a reunion again. I didn't smile back. I didn't need to. That moment wasn't theirs to take. One woman touched the edge of the stone. Her fingers hesitated over the dedication line. I saw her mouth the words, whose work was overlooked. Then she turned toward me and said, "This is beautiful." Her voice cracked on the last word. I thanked her, softly, politely, nothing more. The ceremony ended without applause. Just nods and photos and people pretending they'd always known. I walked the hall alone after that, my heels clicking down the freshly polished tile. The classrooms were bright, the bulletin boards fresh with summer announcements. I ran my hand along the wall, felt the texture of the stone just beneath the paint. This was mine, in the way that a woman finally claiming her name feels sacred. Not loud, not vengeful, just right. Outside, the sun had moved behind a cloud. The wind picked up slightly. I stepped off the path to run my hand through the hedges, checking the blossoms. It smelled like new things, like pencil shavings and clean paper and the kind of beginning I never thought would have my name on it. But here it was, etched, rooted, permanent. Let them forget me in their conversations, their emails, their awkward glances. The building won't, and maybe one day, a girl with quiet hands and sharp thoughts will walk through that entrance and see my name. She won't know me, but she'll know herself a little better. She'll stand up straighter, answer louder, expect more, because someone before her didn't fade. Someone like her wrote it in stone. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to storm in and throw anyone's past at their feet. I didn't even need to raise my voice. All I had to do was show up, quietly, precisely. Dressed in gray slacks, soft blouse, one pen in my purse, and a seat at the head of the table. Not the folding kind from high school, the real kind, polished wood, long as a bus, where decisions are made and minutes are recorded. That's where I sit the advisory board of the foundation that funds half the initiatives in our county, including the very building with my name on it, the one they like to take photos in front of, the one they point to in brochures. They don't always notice me at first. Some still see me as background, which is fine. Let them speak freely. Let them forget. That's how the truth reveals itself. I don't remind them. I let the introductions handle it. Let the board chair say, "This is Miss Loretta Garner, one of our senior advisors. She helped write the equity policy." That's when their posture changes. That's when the color shifts in their faces. I started small. Suggested a few updates to the grant application process. Language that asked more about community service than college prestige. I pushed for blind reviews on scholarship recommendations, stripping names so the choices had to stand on merit alone. I revised our job board standards, required every partner organization to adopt inclusive hiring language. Nothing flashy, nothing disruptive. Just precise strokes of fairness drawn through systems that had once erased girls like me. Some of them figured it out slowly. An old classmate now in admin at a private school emailed me, asking if I'd consider putting in a good word for her daughter, who was applying for a competitive internship we fund. I replied kindly, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm afraid I don't recognize the name. Could you remind me how we know each other?" She responded with a joke about senior moments. I didn't reply. Another former class officer, now seeking a grant for her community garden project, approached me at a regional meeting. "You look so familiar," she said, laughing. "Were you at our reunion?" I nodded. She lit up. "You were sitting by the coats, right?" I nodded again. "Well, it's wonderful to see you here. I didn't realize you were involved." I said, "Yes, I often am." Then I turned to speak to someone else. I don't speak poorly of them in meetings. I don't block their work out of spite. That's not how this power works. It's quieter, cleaner. I support the initiatives that echo the values they once ignored. I back candidates who look like the girls I use to tutor under cafeteria lights. I help approve budgets that ensure no woman ever has to write her name on a blank tag again. When I speak, they listen. When I vote, it counts. And when I leave a meeting, I leave through the front door's me name carved beside them, just in case they need a reminder. One afternoon, I walked through the Glenmore Center alone. The halls were quieter than usual, echoing only with the sound of my steps. On the wall near the main stairwell, someone had framed the old class photo from the reunion. I stopped and stared at it. There they were lined up on the steps, smiling like they'd always belonged. My hands were empty in that moment. I wasn't holding their coats anymore. I was holding the keys. A group of students walked past. One of them glanced at me, then at the plaque on the wall. She read it aloud. Loretta May Garner, founding contributor. Her friend asked, "Who's that?" The first girl shrugged and said, "I think she built this place." And then they were gone. Just a passing moment. But it landed. They forgot me in that rented ballroom, so I built a room they can't leave without seeing me. They erased me from the program. So I rewrote the policy. They asked me to hold the coats. Now I hold the pen. I don't need to be loud. I just need to be lasting. And every time they walk into one of my rooms, whether it's for a fundraiser, a photo op, or a grant pitch, they see my name. In metal, in minutes, in policies, in power. And when they speak, I listen. But I do not linger. I excuse myself before dessert and leave them wondering what they missed. Because they never saw me then. But now, they can't forget. The first email came 3 days after the unveiling. Subject line, "We'd love to feature you." A bright note from a local magazine asking if I'd be willing to sit for an interview. Your story is such an inspiration to the community. They used phrases like unsung hero and pillar of quiet strength. I closed the tab without replying. I knew what they meant. I also knew what they'd missed. Where were these hands when I was washing dishes in the teacher's lounge? Where were their recorders when I was staying late to rewrite proposals others had taken credit for? The next email came from a former classmate. I remembered her laugh more than her name. "I'm so sorry," she wrote. "I never realized how much you did. Would love to grab coffee sometime and catch up." I read that one twice, then hit delete. Not out of malice. Just clarity. I'd spent too much of my life meeting others where they were, folding myself small so they could take up space. Now, I didn't feel the need to re-enter their rooms just because they finally cracked the door open. More messages followed. Little waves of guilt disguised as invitations. "Loretta, we'd love to have you speak at the next alumni luncheon. No need to prepare a speech, just a few words from the heart. A panel on women in leadership, we think you'd be perfect." They meant well. I believe that now. But I declined each one, politely and firmly. No speeches, no panels, no thank yous dressed in belated recognition. I didn't need applause. I needed peace. And I finally had it. I spent my mornings planting herbs on the back porch rosemary for memory, time for patience. I brewed tea slowly. I read novels that made me forget who I was supposed to be. The kind where women live on cliffs or in libraries or in quiet defiance of expectations. I kept my phone on silent, kept my heart steady. Sometimes I walked past the Glenmore building, just to see the sunlight hit the stone right. I'd nod to the maintenance man, wave to the front desk clerk, never pointed out the plaque, never stood too long. My name lived there now, not like a flag, but like a foundation. It didn't need me beside it to prove it was real. One afternoon, a younger woman stopped me in the co-op parking lot. She said, "Are you the Miss Garner, the one with the plaque?" I said I was. She smiled. "Just wanted to say thank you." Then she walked away. No picture, no handshake. Just that. That was the kind of legacy I wanted. Quiet, rooted, understood. I kept everything simple. No new clothes, no upgraded car. I still wrote checks in blue ink. Still used the same chipped mug I'd had for 20 years. I didn't feel the need to wear my change on the outside. It lived inside knowing how I moved, how I chose, how I no longer explained myself to anyone who hadn't earned the right to ask. I still got the newsletters. I still saw the photos from alumni events. They listed the names of panelists, award winners, reunion committee chairs. My name wasn't there. I liked it that way. Let them carry the weight of hosting. I had carried enough. There is a kind of dignity in being known too late. It frees you, reminds you that being seen is not the same as being safe, that recognition is not always reward. Sometimes the reward is simply not needing it anymore. I spent my evenings with the windows open, listening to the wind rustle through the lavender. I cooked slow meals, sent handwritten letters to the girls I mentored reminding them they didn't need to be loud to be powerful, but they did need to be clear. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I thought about that night in the gymnasium. The plastic name tag, the coats, the empty chair, the jokes I smiled at out of habit. I let those memories come and go like weather. I didn't fight them, but I never let them stay. Because that girl, the one who waited to be invited, who hoped to be remembered, she did her job. She got me here, and now she rests, in peace. I never needed the microphone. I needed the silence that comes after, the kind where you can hear your own name and finally believe it. The applause faded without me, but I remained, still, full, unmoved. And that was enough. Some days, I still think about that reunion. But now, when I do, I laugh, not bitter, not sharp. Just one of those soft, breathy chuckles that rolls out like an old tune you forgot you liked. The image comes back clear as glass. The folding chairs, the name tag with my own handwriting, the coats in my arms like old burdens no one asked if I wanted to carry. I see it now like a scene from someone else's life, familiar but far. Because I'm not in that room anymore. I'm somewhere better, somewhere steadier. I sit by the window most mornings, feed the birds from the little ledge I patted with scraps of towel. The robins come first, always early and decisive. The cardinals wait a bit longer, as if they know the beauty they carry doesn't need to be rushed. I've started naming them, not because they're mine, but because I like giving names to things that are small and overlooked. Maybe it's a habit from all those years. I write again, too. Not reports or meeting notes or carefully worded proposals. Poetry. The kind I used to scribble in the margins of my school books. I keep a stack of notebooks in a basket near the armchair. Some poems are long. Some are just one line. I wrote one the other day that simply said, "She built everything they stood on. They just never thanked the floor." I laughed when I wrote that, closed the notebook and sat there, smiling at the plain truth of it. I'd spent so many years trying to be useful, to hold things up, to fill in the gaps, to stay steady while others leaned. I thought being the brick in the wall was enough, that maybe, if I made myself solid, they'd notice me eventually. But they didn't. Not really. They leaned and never once looked down to ask what held the wall up. Now I know. I wasn't the brick. I was the pillar. Not decorative, not replaceable, not background. Foundational. And pillars don't ask to be seen. They simply endure. They carry. They hold. I wonder sometimes how many other women are still out there, still holding things up in silence. Still being the reliable one. The background hum that keeps everything running. How many are writing grocery lists instead of dreams? Folding other people's laundry while their own voice goes unheard. I hope they find a window like mine. I hope they find a place where birds come close and notebooks stay open. I hope they find their own names again, not waiting for someone else to say it first. Sometimes I get letters now, not from the ones who forgot me, but from girls, teenagers, students, early career women who walk through that building and read the plaque. Some of them say they feel seen for the first time. Others say they didn't know someone could come from quiet and still leave a mark. That's legacy, I think. Not the stories people tell about you, but the ones they start telling themselves after they read your name. And my name? It lives now. Not in their albums. Not in their speeches. But in the steel and stone and soil of something built to last. That's more than I ever hoped for. I don't need the applause. I don't even need the memory. I need the peace. And I have it. I walk through my house without shrinking now. I decorate it the way I want. Lace curtains in the kitchen. A painting I bought at a flea market above the fireplace, not because it's famous, but because it reminds me of a place I've never been and might still go. I eat dessert first some nights. I play records I used to hide. I take naps without guilt. That might not sound like revolution to some people, but to me, it's freedom. This life, it's mine. Entirely. Not borrowed. Not bargained for. Not filtered through someone else's spotlight. Just mine. And when I go whenever that is, I don't want a big service or a crowd of people saying things they forgot to say while I was alive. I just want one girl to stand in front of that plaque, read my name, and whisper, "She was more than they thought." That'll be enough. Because I wasn't the decoration. I was the foundation. They just never looked down far enough. But I know now, and that's what matters. I was the pillar, and I never needed to be anything else. It started with a letter, just one. I wrote it the way you'd write to an old friend, no grand introduction, no explanation of who I was or what I'd done, just a plain envelope, a plain sheet of paper, and a simple title across the top, The Forgotten Women. I sent it to 3 women I'd once worked beside. Women who, like me, had been the ones who stayed late, who kept the records, who ordered the coffee and asked the questions no one wrote down. Women who'd been left out of photos but never missed a deadline. I wrote, "We built things. Quietly. Completely. And I think it's time we remember each other. I didn't expect much. A kind word, maybe. A thank you. But what came back were pages of stories written in shaky, cursive, and printed from ancient computers. Stories about boardrooms and baby showers, offices and family dinners. One woman wrote about how she'd trained 5 different men to take the role she was never offered. Another said she'd typed every grant that funded her university's growth, but no one ever asked her to speak at the ribbon cutting. And one, from Nebraska, wrote only, "They made me feel invisible, but I was watching everything." I cried when I read that one. By the end of the month, the 3 letters turned into 9. By spring, it was 32. Women I didn't know women. I would never meet writing back to tell me their names, their jobs, their unpaid hours, their strength, their fire, their exhaustion. I started an archive. Nothing digital. Just a shelf in my den, lined with labeled folders. Teachers, secretaries, mothers, nurses, caretakers. I printed every letter, every photograph. One envelope had a Polaroid of a woman holding a clipboard at a construction site in 1976. She wore no hard hat, no fancy title, just a look on her face that said, "I keep things upright." We started including a question in each new letter. Whose name did they forget? The answers came back full of light. Grandmothers, godmothers, foster mothers, girls who dropped out to care for siblings, a neighbor who fixed cars in her driveway and fed every stray dog and kid who passed by. We realized we weren't just remembering ourselves. We were remembering each other. And that was the beginning of the scholarship. One of the women, Eileen, suggested we pool what we could just a little. A potluck fund, she called it. "We don't need a gala," she said. "We've got grit." So we did. No big sponsors. No glossy brochures. Just checks in the mail and names we believed in. We named it the Forgotten Women Fund. And we gave it one rule. Any girl who receives it must write down the name of a forgotten woman she knows. Someone who held the line. Who did the work. Who mattered even if no one noticed. The first recipient was a girl named Kamari. She wrote about her aunt, who cleaned motel rooms at night and tutored her in math every morning before school. "She told me I was smart before anyone else did," Kamari wrote. "This scholarship is hers, really." We framed her essay and mailed copies to every woman who had contributed. After that, more girls applied. They came with names we repeated out loud at our little kitchen tables. Esther, Leon, Dolores, Annie, Fatima, Ruth. We didn't host banquets. We hosted phone trees. We didn't buy centerpieces. We mailed secondhand books and hand-knitted scarves with notes tucked inside. We didn't try to be flashy. We tried to be lasting. And we were. We created something sacred not because the world needed to know, but because we needed to feel it, to see ourselves reflected in each other, to say out loud, "I see you. I remember you. You were not small." Every month, I still write the letter. Sometimes it's just 1 page. Sometimes 2. Always typed on my old typewriter. Always signed with my full name. Because I earned it. The last line never changes. They forgot us. But we remembered each other. And that was enough. The women write back with updates. A surgery that went well. A grandson who graduated. A recipe for gingerbread cookies that doesn't need molasses. We laugh. We cry. We stitch ourselves into one long line of knowing. And what a thing it is to be known. Not for noise or beauty or charm, but for endurance, for wisdom, for the kind of work that holds generations together like seams in a dress no one bothered to admire only to wear. I look at that shelf of letters some evenings and wonder what a museum would think of them. Maybe someday we'll send them. Or maybe they'll stay here, in this little house with the lavender in the yard and the birds at the window. But however long they last, these stories, these names live now. And we live with them. Not forgotten. Not erased. Held. Remembered. Together. When I finalized my will, I didn't pause over the usual questions. I already knew. I wasn't leaving anything to those who'd forgotten me while I was still breathing. Not a box, not a dollar, not a name in their mouth. My legacy would not be folded into scrapbooks that never opened, or holiday cards scribbled out of obligation. My name would go where it could live with dignity. I gave the house to a local women's shelter. Quiet place, clean light, good bones. I pictured a woman standing at the kitchen window someday, stirring coffee in a chipped mug and realizing maybe for the first time that peace doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits for you to come home. The rest me small estate, my savings. The rights to my written work I left to the Glenmore Library. They asked if I wanted a room named after me, and I said yes, but not a conference room or a corner office. I wanted the reading nook. The little sunlit alcove where the shy girls go, where the thinkers sit, where the quiet ones find themselves in paper and ink. That's where I asked them to hang the plaque. They agreed. They always do now. But it wasn't just my money I wanted to leave behind. I wanted to leave a record. So I handwrote letters 12 in total and sealed them in envelopes addressed to the archives. Not dramatic farewells, just reflections, a little history. Some stories that never made it into minutes or press releases. I told the truth in them, not the bitter truth, but the whole truth. About what it feels like to be overlooked. About what it takes to keep showing up anyway. About the kind of love that doesn't need to be seen to matter. I added copies of my poems, some photographs, even one of the old name tags with the handwriting fading. I labeled the folder, Loretta May Garner, She Stayed. They'll shelve it under local history. I like that. Sometimes I imagine a girl stumbling on it decades from now, researching for a school project. She'll read the plaque, the letters, maybe even the scholarship name, and she'll think, she must have been important. And the best part? No one will have to explain that to her. She'll just know, because it's all there now. In stone, in ink, in memory. The final entry in my journal came easy. I didn't labor over it. I sat with a cup of tea chamomile, always and wrote in soft loops. Now they'll never forget. Not because I shouted, but because I carved it. Then I closed the book, tied it with a ribbon, and placed it with the others. Sometimes I sit in the Glenmore reading nook, just to watch. Kids come in with backpacks too heavy for their shoulders. Teenagers curl into chairs with headphones and dreams. And sometimes, one of them runs a finger along the bottom of the plaque where it says, in honor of quiet strength. They don't always read the name aloud, but they see it. They pass under it. They carry it with them, whether they realize it or not. I've stopped needing recognition. What I have now is presence. A legacy that walks without me, whispers through shelves, echoes in the click of a girl's heels down the library hallway. I don't need my name in lights. I only ever needed it to last. And it has. They forgot me in a rented hall. But every morning, they walk under my name carved in stone. That'll do. Oh yes, that'll do just fine.